Hey, YouTubers.
You're ahead of me. I'm still setting up meeting on my slow ass computer. Here we go. Good morning, YouTube. These things put up here. That, record. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, May the 8th. Oh, 9:20 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. It is May, so we start. It's never completely shuts down, but it is slower. The Golden Herkies happened the other night. We know we're getting towards the end of the academic athletic school year, Scott, and it's okay. It's okay for everybody to kind of exhale, and we're going to look ahead, go down the football roster. Looks like Iowa is pretty much done in the portal. So we'll talk about that. But how are things in your world?
I got a lot of things going on, but it's really not. I did actually write an Iowa story. I think it's supposed to appear next week, but don't hold me to that because I think I've written it, but you never know. Uh, but we've got a bunch of different little projects, and now we're on to kind of summer enterprise projects. We've got one I can't really say yet, at least publicly, but it's pretty intense, a lot of work, and then several other things. So it's funny when people, you get to the end of a season, it's like, oh, things will slow down for you. It's like the games don't really, for me, the games are the games. And
Yeah,
yeah, football season's pretty intense. It's like a sprint, but the rest of the year, it's like running a mile, or
yeah,
1600. It's like you're still working pretty hard. I mean, because the stories we write are not necessarily game stories. So we've got other stuff. House is going to be solved here pretty quick. Everything got sent in yesterday, so that will throw a lot more into the pile. So, but yeah, for the sports season at Iowa, softball had a kind of a thud for an
yeah.
ending,
That
and
was a bummer yesterday. Lost to Penn State in the Big Ten tournament first game.
yeah,
So they were 48th in the RPI going into yesterday, Scott. So probably not an NCAA tournament team. Um, kind of on that bubble. We'll see what happens. And but they were in another postseason tournament a few years ago and won it. And it felt like, okay, maybe they can build on that, and they didn't. Maybe this time around they can sustain something if they have some postseason success beyond the Big Ten tournament.
yeah, I know this is totally spontaneous talking about softball, but it probably deserves it because it's something we haven't talked about. Nobody's really talked about. Um, this is one of the more remarkable stories I think I've seen in Iowa sports in a long, long time because, I know, first of all, Renee Gillespie, who now is, let go or whatever. I don't know. I didn't play her contract situation or anything, but she was out for the whole year because of health reasons, and then she won't return now. The interim coach, as we know, had a huge blow up over whether people kneel or stand for the flag. I thought that issue had been resolved a few years ago, but apparently not. And then another interim coach came in, and they did a really nice job and coming in and putting themselves sixth in the Big Ten, winning what 34 games or something
They're
like that.
35 and 18.
Yeah, 35 and won a lot of series really since what they've won like 10 out of the last 12, counting yesterday's loss to Penn State. Um, Even if I think that's remarkable for where this program has been since Gail Blevins left. And I think, Carl, I can't remember his last name, he is the second interim coach. Um, they're going to go with a national search, and Beth talked to her last week a little bit about it, and they're just going to try to find the best candidate. And she's shown that she's willing to go do that when it comes to these hires that and some of them like gymnastics, Washington, Jen Llewellyn, she went out and got the Washington head coach. And I think that they're very much willing to do what it needs to be done. And I think softball is maybe the most potential growth area that Iowa has of any of the sports. I mean, this is as you're involved personally with volleyball. but you're so hemmed in by the great programs in the Big Ten in that sport.
Yeah.
But I think softball, I mean, and I think volleyball and softball in the state is so strong at the high school level and club level. But I think softball has that potential to get back to a really high level, whereas volleyball, it's just it's
Yeah.
like, hey, we're a Division III school, and we're going to join the SEC for football, and we want to compete. That's kind of where Iowa women's volleyball is in this league. So
Yeah. Volleyball needs to get to the point where it's in the middle of the Big Ten. Because if you're in the middle of the Big Ten, you're in the NCAA tournament. Um, and you're right. I mean, a lot of in-state talent in softball. I think the Valley Player of the Year at Northern Iowa is from Bondurant Farrar, maybe.
okay,
So yeah, there are good players. There are good players throughout the state in those sports, but we'll see what happens with the softball team. May as well throw baseball in there too.
yeah.
Big series this weekend out down in Des Moines at
Mhm.
the Iowa Cubs Stadium against Oregon State, which is ranked top 15. I've seen some different rankings for it. I think Iowa Notes lists it at number 10. I don't know what rankings it cites, but and then finish up with Oregon at Banks. Two big, real big series. I looked at Baseball America released its Field of 64 projection yesterday, Scott, and Hawkeyes were last four in.
Mhm.
So these are important. You can't fall flat on your face these next two weekends.
Yeah, exactly. And these are two really challenging opponents. You've worst case scenario, you got to go at least 1-2, and probably 3-3 in total, and then probably do a little bit in the Big Ten tournament to solidify a chance to get in. But um, if there is one thing that's just completely frustrating about this program is as awesome of a year that they've had in the Big Ten, and it's been off the charts. Let's face it, this is historic in some ways. To lose those midweek games
Yeah,
constantly against lesser competition, I mean, it kills them. If they didn't lose to my alma mater, Western Illinois, or they aren't losing to what, Illinois State and
yeah,
games like that, if they're winning those games, then they're all right. And I think the other thing is like public confidence is would be so much higher if you're
yeah,
don't even play them, if you're going to lose. And usually, it's kind of funny, the midweek games are always treated differently in the past, and just like, yeah, it's our fifth starter, and it's,
yeah,
we get some guys in who haven't, played a little, but you can't do that when you're battling for the NCAA tournament, and you just seems to be such a drop off, and giving up a grand slam against Illinois State and
yeah.
stuff like that. So yeah,
And then they canceled the Illinois Chicago game. I think that was this week or last week. They
yeah,
they put a yeah. I don't think we could fit
yeah,
that one in. So
yeah,
probably a good move. And now, you know, you it's kind of that double-edged sword where, oh no, shit, we have to play Oregon and Oregon State, but it's also a great opportunity, and that's how Iowa baseball has to approach it. Is this is our chance to get off that bubble and just solidify our spot, and don't have to even worry about the Big
yeah.
Ten tournament.
And you're home. I mean, Des Moines home, basically. I
Yeah,
mean, they got to fly from Corvallis to Des Moines, and then the other team has to fly from Eugene to Iowa City or Cedar
yep,
Rapids and stuff. So you have an opportunity, and I think this is a pretty big series. Obviously, both of them are. It's kind of funny when you think about it. It's like, wow, Oregon State, you have all the teams you play, and in Des Moines, you're going to play one of the better programs, and they've been historically really good. And even though now they're kind of vagabonds for a couple of years until the Pac-12 kind of reignites. But yeah, I think this is a really what's important is that you reach this point of the season and they're competing for the NCAA tournament, and that's really a big thing because this is a program that's it's got some challenges ahead of it.
yeah, and credit to Rick for playing these series. A while back, their RPI was not good because of it, their non-conference schedule, and he's boosted that up. They've played, uh, you know, traditional baseball powers a lot in the
Mhm.
last several years. So credit to him. And that, like we just said, by doing that, you give yourself an opportunity right now to prove it.
Right. And as we know, the House settlement is close to being finalized, and they submitted their paperwork on what they're going to do, and or the attorneys what they agreed upon, which was basically anybody that would have lost a roster spot now can be grandfathered in to their schools or across the board. But schools are permitted to allow it to happen. They don't have to do that. I don't know. I think eventually, I think there's just too much to lose. I don't think the judges, she asked them to do something, they did something, and so I would expect it to get approved. But as we know, when you look down the road, and this is where my fear is, and I actually, had a conversation with Beth about it. And as of right now, there's nothing to worry about. But I remember 2020 too.
Yeah,
When everything happened and different circumstances. But when you start to look at these programs, and you start to be a little more cutthroat on, well, we need to pay up, and what does certain schools bring, then this is one that to me is one that's vulnerable. And Rick Heller has done yeoman's work. They have great coaches over there, and they have in almost every the primary sports for a while. He's as good as any of them. I kind of look at him as the baseball version of Lisa Bluter, as for the women's basketball program. I mean, just really consistent. They win, elevated the program. I just, when he finally hangs it up, what's going to come down next? And they couldn't get the stadium redone. Baseball loses about $3 million a year at Iowa. I think it's the losingest men's sport when it comes to finances. So it's just, and Iowa's not unique to that. I think you look at Minnesota and like a Michigan State, Penn State. I mean, if you're Penn State, you got a lot more sports than Iowa does, and you've won. Wrestling like Iowa does.
right.
Ice hockey's in the Final Four or Frozen Four. Do you start looking for ways to cut back? So I think that unless things get changed in baseball, that's one you just have to cross your fingers on for a while.
Yeah, a lot of this is going to be fluid, and we'll kind of see if this settlement does go through. From Ross Dellinger's Twitter last night, he's done a good job with this. There are several. Scott Athletic Times does a good job with this as well, but I just happened to find this tweet. And this was a follow-up to what was submitted yesterday. In a filing tonight, and this was from 12 hours ago, Judge Claudia Wilkins has allowed the objectors to file responses to the NCAA and Power Conference's revision by May 13th. The plaintiffs and the NCAA can then respond by May 16th. So as Ross says, the House case decision will likely drag on for at least another week. So, and then we have the White House getting involved too with Nick Saban and some NIL guy from Texas Tech, apparently. So we'll see. We'll see if they can help or just create more chaos, Scott.
Yeah. Let's see. The NCAA, college sports, and bureaucracy. It's never really worked. But then again, also doing it by executive order, no matter who the president is not going to work either.
No.
I mean, to me, the best thing, I don't have a problem with forming a commission to study college sports at a congressional level or a federal level. I think that's probably good. If you're going to do it, though, you got to take the findings, whatever happens out of the House settlement, and take those as don't even try to alter it. Just let that one go. But how can you build off of that?
Yeah.
And it's got to be inclusive of thought and diverse opinions. That includes liberal and conservative. It's got to include student athlete involvement. And it's going to take time. You can't just decide, July 16th, hey, we're going to do it this way and move on. No, it's going to probably take years, or at least a year, to come up with some sort of finding, to me, that can maybe help advance it. Is it antitrust? I don't know. I don't think so. And you've got all these different factions at work, and the attorneys are going to love to be a part of it. And so, as we know, this is never ending. It's constant and clearly cloudy, as Ference says sometimes.
Yeah, once you get the uh, lawyers involved, no offense to any lawyers that are listening, then it becomes um, oh, you always wonder if something's going to pop up from a legal standpoint, a challenge, things like that. So yeah, I think you continue to be proactive with it instead of what got your ass in this place in this place in the first place, which
Mhm.
was being stubborn and taking it to the Supreme Court.
Right.
So now be proactive and do the right thing, and because now you have no choice.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna be back in court if you don't do the right thing.
And this is going to be challenged anyway. It's going to
Yep,
come back to court, and
states will get involved.
states, and what ultimately, and I don't think this is a problem, and I think this is probably somewhat of a solution, is to take it out of states' hands and turn it into a federal issue. Because what you don't want is the situation where there are different laws applied to different states regarding NIL and everything else. You want it to be, now there could be differences, of course.
Yeah,
Some states will have federal income, or some states won't have income tax, others will. That's state by state stuff that happens in the real world. But I think this is a situation where you want to try to make things as organized as possible. And then there's some people who want to blow it up and talk about like you know try to pull down the power conferences, and that to me is futile. I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC are the entities that they are. You're not, unless you just implode all of it, and if you do, then what are you going to do? That you're going to implode every league. Then I just don't see that. So I think even though there's urgency to this, I think you've got to be prudent in how you approach it, because you can't just throw it down an edict and say we're going to do this, and because it's going to end up in court, and it's going to get beat. Because we saw it 9-0 Supreme Court. That's not going to change. The Supreme Court's going to do it again. And
yep,
if you try to change anything, I just want the student athletes to have a voice. They have to have a voice, because they can't be told, because if they try to impose limits on what they can make, curtail the restraint of trade and stuff like that, they're gonna get smoked in
yep,
court. And what they're trying to do is avoid them being considered employees. So I just think that this is going to be just really entertaining.
yeah. We'll see where it goes from here. Going to be at least another week or so before anything is finalized, and it may take longer than that. You just kind of hang in there. It's still May, and hopefully they can get to it before the fall semester starts, and those things can be put into place, and we can get a little semblance of organization to this whole operation. But don't bet on it, because it's been what, 5 years we've been doing this podcast, and we've been talking about this for 5 years, and we're still uncertain what the future may be. And even with a House settlement, we won't really be certain what the future will be, because this is very fluid. Scott got some of his grievances out before we started recording about what happened at Carver Hawkeye Arena on Sunday. So we'll focus on the actual on-court display that we saw, if we can call it that. Just suffice it to say that Iowa wasn't the one in charge of everything over there. And when you have a lot of cooks kind of organize something that big, sometimes it tastes like poop.
Yeah.
So I said this to Scott too before we started recording. I was bored as hell in that game for the most part. It's great seeing Caitlin back. I'm happy for the fans that got to go and interact with her and get to see, the favorite daughter come home. It was nice. But the game sucked. It was not competitive. But in perfect Caitlin form, she saved the day. by making a shot to end the third quarter from beyond her mark, where she broke the record as the all-time leading scorer. So she seems to just add chapters to her story as we go along here, Scott. And this was another one that we'll remember for a long time.
Yeah, I sure will. People who were there, I'm sure they were excited about it. They felt good watching the whole thing, and or at least watching Caitlin. And we got to remember, she had a tight quad, left quad. I mean, she had ice on it, after the game, and she only played 19 minutes because the day before she didn't play at all in the Fever's first preseason game. So
She
this,
was riding the bike throughout too, wasn't
yeah,
she? On the
yeah. So
stationary bike.
mhm. So if this game was anywhere else, I don't know that she would have played, but coming to Iowa, she's going to play,
Mhm.
that just would imagine that. I mean, unless she just couldn't walk, that she's going to play.
What
And
were
she
the
scored,
average ticket prices? Like 650?
those, yes, I saw like the 440 was like the lowest, so it was just insane there,
Yeah.
to get
And
in.
what, 1.3 million viewers?
Yeah. For an exhibition game, and this isn't even a preseason game. This is an exhibition,
Yeah.
on ESPN. So people are tuning in. They like Caitlin Clark. They want to see her and her theatrics, and she pulled it off right at the end of the third quarter there with. I mean, it's like Larry Bird, and it's like Babe Ruth, and I don't throw her in that category
How about
lightly.
Otani? Can we be a little bit more modern? Can she be
No,
Otani?
because and here's why, like Babe Ruth in the 32 series points to the
Oh, okay. I see where
audience,
you're going.
calling your shot,
And the 3-point contest with Bird. I got you.
yeah, and Bird, and then like, I don't know, it's my favorite mixtape of all time, and I didn't even like the Celtics growing up, but
2-0
watch
Knicks,
it.
by the way.
Yeah, I know, I saw that. Great, I was going to bring that up to you, so you're in
Trying
great
not to jinx anything, so I don't want to
shape.
gloat too much.
But there's one time where he's, I'm going to get it right over there and I'm going to shoot it in your face, that Xavier McDaniel, and he did, and and just all those things. Well, she launched a 3-point. It's like scripted almost, but it's too tough to actually happen with regularity, which is shooting that 6-foot 3-pointer right by her logo, the 22 logo, and boom, it's just like, God, what an amazing uh what an amazing moment that was, and that saved the day, as you said.
Yeah, walked right into that three and said it looked fluid, it looked natural, and looked good from the release. So I know you do the decibel thing over there. What were the decibel readings over there?
At the very beginning, when she hit the first three of the game, it was
Mhm.
117, which is
Wow.
pretty damn high. The highest I've ever recorded at Carver was 119, and that was her shot against Indiana. 117 is the highest I recorded for, like, it was like Hall and um the guy who was there forever, Kemmerer. His
Oh, Penn
revert,
State,
yeah,
Iowa wrestling. Yeah.
wrestling, yeah. And so that was 117 for that, and that equaled it. But what I found most interesting, even beyond Caitlin stuff, was the next three, which was like a steal on the inbound.
Mhm.
Kelsey Mitchell's three, 116.
Ooh.
And it was really high for most of the first half, at least what competitive, at least some of the phases of it, that whenever anybody scored, DeWanna Bonner, it didn't matter. It registered in the 110s to 115 range. So they were pretty amped to cheer for everybody on the Fever. It wasn't just let's cheer for Caitlin and sit on our hands for everybody else. And the Caitlin three hit 115, which people are like, well, how can that be lower? Well, you got to also remember the circumstances that Caitlin's first three was coming out of lineups where it was I mean, that was
Yeah.
like in the 111, 112 range. People were cheering for her. And then so it's not that hard to go from cheering and you feel that combustion and a wow, but when she hit that three, the crowd was kind of like, you know, hey, we're watching, a game that could end up by 100-point difference. And then she dropped a 36-3. And then that one was prolonged. It was like it rose and then it kind of barely tapered down. It was like, it's like everybody got surprised by it. It's like, wow. And it was like, yeah, keep going. And then, she goes to the sidelines, then she's like waving her hands in the air and everybody's cheering even more. So, but what I was most impressed with, and afterwards I grabbed on the side, I grabbed Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham and a couple other people and talked about it. And they were just like blown away. Kelsey's like, and you got to remember, Kelsey Mitchell was a really good player for Ohio State. In her last game against Iowa, she scored 27 points. And she goes, I felt like a Hawkeye today. And that was, to me, pretty interesting.
Yeah, Cunningham played at Carver too with Missouri in the NCAA tournament, right?
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
I
I think
remember
you're
that
right.
correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and it's changed a little bit since they were here.
Yeah.
Since Mitchell, the
Yeah.
atmosphere has changed a little bit. But again, a great exhibition, literally for the sport, women's basketball, women's sports, and Caitlin continues to entertain, and good luck to the NBA and WNBA in their negotiations, their next negotiations with this, because much like the NCAA, they better get ready to pay up because the game has changed.
Yeah. I
That
think,
collective bargaining is next year.
yeah, they can opt out, I think, after this year.
Yeah.
So, well, what will be fascinating with this, and they got to be careful, the players do too, is
Yeah.
not to overstep themselves. It is surging, and they're not paid real well. We know that, but they're still not making money either. So it's kind of like women's basketball. Now part of that, and most of that actually, is the contracts with television networks. The reason why NBA players, NFL players, Major League Baseball players make as much money as they do is because of the television contracts. At women's basketball, traditionally with the colleges, have just been folded in. Like, all right, and also and almost like, well, can you please play a few more, air a few women's games? Now it's a different market, so at some
Yeah.
point that's got to grow. I think the same deal with the WNBA. It's always been a losing proposition, but now it's getting into the different stratosphere with Caitlin and frankly, I think more players are known going into the WNBA than men's players going into the NBA. Now you'll get to know them,
Mhm.
Wemby and all those guys, but it's also because there's not the foreign element and one and done element. You've got the women, they just continue to rise. So and the popularity, you hate to say it, but it's a lot of it is Caitlin, because they went to LSU with Angel Reese and only about 6,000 people showed up. So Caitlin is a big factor in this, and they have to be cognizant that the players can't overstep themselves. There's when you start to talk money, deserves ain't got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how the television ratings show up this year
Mhm.
in year two of Caitlin and that rookie class, and then Paige Becker's coming
Mhm.
into the league. So we'll see if they can raise the profile even more. Probably a good time for us to take a break here before we dive into the Iowa football roster. Finish up the show with that and let you guys know that support for this podcast and all of the podcasts here on Hawk Fanatic comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. We'll hear from a few more sponsors now, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk a little Hawkeye football. Hang tight. Now we are back on the Hotspot podcast. Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights, we switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa could switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated. You'll remember them from El Banditos, Perez Tacos, Peaceful Fool. A lot of businesses here in Iowa City. Go check them out. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Free music on the weekends. Great food all the time. Black Angel Restaurant. We appreciate their sponsorship, and a shameless plug for a pod I dropped earlier this week with AJ Ediger from the Iowa women's basketball team. Thank you to Scott for alerting me to that story idea. I did a podcast, which I will now turn into a story in Little Village magazine. May just be online. I'm not sure it'll be in the actual magazine, but that's where you can find it. Working on that now. But had a good time talking to AJ about her major in social justice. We talked some women's basketball, what her future is. She wants to get into coaching. So check out that podcast. It's on the feed. And appreciate you, Scott, for alerting me to that.
Yeah, she's always been a very interesting person. And one of the things that that we do in this profession is we try to get to know these athletes. And I think in the age of Caitlin and then post-COVID, we didn't get a good enough chance to do that. Sorry, with some of these players. Gracias.
It's allergy season.
Yeah, switching languages there. But she has a very interesting story to share. So I was glad to see that you were able to hook up with her and I'll have to listen to that one because I am interested in what she has to say, and I know she got to be a real fan favorite. And some of her stuff on whether it was Instagram or TikTok videos, and just it does show the popularity of the women's program here when you have players like her or Jada Gyamfi who are just beloved, and it's not and they barely see the floor. And but I think AJ has a real bright future in what she wants to do and how she wants to do it.
Yeah, it's a program that I think does a lot too with from Habitat for Humanity that they've done for years. Lisa did that way back to food pantry contributions and things they do for the community. So, and she wants to use her platform, the ability that she got attention for being an Iowa women's basketball player. She wants to use that to do good in the future. And that's, it's admirable and good to hear because we're going to need this next generation. Yeah. And I'll leave it at that. All right, Iowa football. As we said, Scott, it probably the numbers you have right there. This is pretty much the roster. Could be a little wiggle room here moving forward because injuries, and you just never know what's going to happen anymore with the transfer portal. But going into the transfer portal is now closed, so it would have to be somebody coming out, and we'll see what happens. But what numbers are you looking at right now?
Yeah, I have now that they've added a couple of pieces in the portal that they're at 85 scholarships. The last one went to Jackson Rexroth, who's projected to start. So
he's earned that.
Yeah, he has. He's played on his special teams. He's been on the two deep. He's yes. Definitely deserving of that role. And then I have him at 107 overall. But as we're seeing now with the portal situation, they may not have to cut from that. They may not have to go to 105 at least for a year. And that I don't know if that means they'll add. In some ways, maybe they should. And this is one thing I know I asked Kirk about was the unfairness of the 105 and just how they did it the right way, which was they told everybody in advance, we don't think you're on the 105, or you're not guaranteed a spot on the 105 right. Is how they determined it. And so, which enabled several players who would have been very much contributors, maybe special teamers, potentially depth chart guys that, ended up going to different schools. And I think that's, they did it the right way. And I think he was kind of mad because he's like, schools that maybe didn't do it the right way are now going to be rewarded for it, that just kept everybody and then we're going to cut everybody at the end of spring football. So I think this is but I have them at 107 right now, Rob. They've added two late guys and at defensive back, and then they've got long snapper who's a walk on and another quarterback. So that's kind of where they are right now.
So if they were to add to the 107, it would have to come from guys that have left, right? It would have to be guys coming back. They couldn't take guys from another school that went into the portal, or it doesn't matter. Now, is it just there's flexibility now with what we heard yesterday in terms of what they came back with for roster adjustments and grandfathering them in?
Yeah, the grandfathering in part of it, what they could do is, this is again, I'm only speaking,
Yeah, we're talking like injuries or somebody quits football, or you just need to add depth.
How they do that, they could find a way to push, say, look, we brought him back because otherwise we're going to cut him and then bring somebody else in. I'm sure there are ways around, at this stage to make this work. And then, it's a non-scholarship player, but as we know, with some guys who aren't non-scholarship, it's like, well, we'll just give you an extra 40 grand that covers your tuition, or at least 20 grand for the fall, and then bump you to scholarship in the winters, stuff like that.
Yep.
That there are ways to work around that. Otherwise and then there might be a few more out there. I don't anticipate them adding much, if maybe more than a couple pieces tops, and they're probably more in the walk-on category, and they're probably more in the maybe. I just don't see them doing that.
Yeah, and you just don't want to bring somebody in, and anybody that you would bring back, you still have to continue with that honest approach of, you're at the end of the roster. We're going to bring you back and you'll be a part of the team, but there's no guarantees. And somebody might be like, well, I feel like I have a chance, a clearer path to playing time, at this other school or whatever. So we'll see how it goes. But for our purposes, Scott, let's take a look at what this roster looks like heading into the summer. And where would you like to start? Do you want to let's start with let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Just kind of go. I think that's probably the easiest way to split it up. We kind of know what the quarterback situation is. Room looks, I think, pretty solid.
Yeah, I like the way it played out after the spring, especially. It was really unfortunate for them. It would have looked outstanding if they were able to keep Brendan Sullivan, but as we know, he's now going to be a starter at Tulane. That's really good. That's a good spot for him. I think he's a good player, and wish him well, because certainly they really valued him. But when you do bring in a guy that costs you a lot of money, and Mark Gronowski, you expect him to start. It's free agency. You're
and play well.
Yeah, play well. And he's going to be the difference based on their schedule, on whether Iowa is a good team, a competitive team, versus a bowl
Music City Bowl.
Yeah, right. He's going to be
no
the
offense to Music City Bowl.
When you look at, in particular, they're playing 4 teams on their schedule that won double digits last year, won 11 or more games last year, and 3 of them went to the playoff. The other one's Iowa State on the road that went to the Big 12 championship game. So they're 1 game away from the playoff. When you've got that on your schedule, your quarterback has to be better than what they've been in since Beathard, probably. Although Stanley had some nice moments, but then I think beyond that, we all know about Gronowski. We'll talk about him all summer, but the other ones to me are where things get interesting, and not just from a backup perspective this year. It's the 2026 and beyond discussion. And Hank Brown kind of, I guess, semi-solidified himself as being the number 2. Jackson Stratton had a really good spring, and he's the number 3 right now. And, he wasn't great when he had to come in and play last year, against UCLA. He did have a touchdown pass there, but he was efficient. He engineered victory, and
And
maybe he did.
and he had no experience. I mean, when you
Yeah.
consider the context of what he was, his position, I thought he did all right.
What, fifth string walk on, and then all of a sudden you're thrown in there, and you've thrown in the second half of a game out in LA against a decent team, then start at Maryland and start against a really good defense in Nebraska, and um, won games. There's nothing wrong with that. But anyway, I think he's probably starts camp as the number 3, but then you got Jeremy Huklinski that they picked up from Wake Forest, and their new senior offensive analyst, Warren Ruggiero, recruited him and coached him for a year at Wake Forest. So he's got an opportunity there. And then, Jimmy Sullivan has been in, and yeah, his head's swimming, but you got to see a lot of stuff. It's going to slow down for him a little bit. And now he goes through the phase of summer throwing. And then finally you bring in, I think one of the smartest walk-on pickups that they've made in a long, long time, and Ryan Fitzgerald, Pat Fitzgerald's son. He's a winner. I mean, Loyola they're in a tough area in Chicagoland, parochial school area, and he's a winner. And his dad obviously is good. He's had a lot of MAC offers, and as we've seen, that's nothing to sniff at. First of all, your starting quarterback now was an FCS guy that you overlooked when he was at Naperville. There was a guy up the road that just got drafted by the Raiders in the 6th round that you overlooked, so you could go out and get somebody who never played for you. I mean, you think about Deuce Hogan, 4-star, picks Iowa over Georgia and Baylor. Now he's on his 4th school, Nicholls State, and
Evaluation and development is not great.
yeah, right. So, right now you've got 6 guys. You've got a commitment from Cash Herrera. I think they want to get another one. We'll see where that takes them. So it's like these 2 pots for me. Starter, Mark Gronowski gets healthy. He did throw. I don't know how much you got to see him on the open practice. Thought he looked pretty good. And then it's kind of like, okay, what's 26 and beyond going to be? And that's where it's really going to match up. And as we know, Rob, there's been a ton of attrition at that position, and it's going to continue because whoever doesn't get the gig next year is probably going to hit the portal. And only one of these guys was here even last summer, and that was Stratton. So he's a walk-on. So it's that part's, but you do want to build some sort of stability. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of the season where you look, if you just analyze and look at this season in particular, it's what can we do with a 1-year quarterback that a free agent that we brought in?
Mm-hmm.
Can he stabilize this position and and make it more attractive when you're recruiting in the future? Say, okay, this is what the quarterback position can be here, because previously you really don't have a lot to sell in the last 5 years. So that's like one component of it. And then, as Scott said, are we comfortable when it comes to December and we're going through bowl prep? Do we have a guy for 2026, or do we have to go in the portal again and do this again? And that's the race that's being run, right?
Yeah, and it's expensive if you continue to do this.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you look at, and this is why they're throwing so much resources at the younger people here, and they have to. And now you have a different eye for talent and a different coach, and so that's going to be helpful. But if Hank Brown, let's say he works out, let's say he shows enough during the fall as the backup, he absorbs it, he looks good. They say, you know what, we're just going to stand, we're going to make him our number 1 or whatever, but it's a huge competition next year. We like him. That's a much less costly situation than saying we got to go back in the portal again. I mean, quarterbacks in the Gronowski area, you're talking 2 million plus. You just are. And it's going to be it's going to be growing from that now that everybody can pay for these quarterbacks. So if let's say it is Hank Brown and he is good this year, maybe you give him a little bit more next year, then he has a great season. Then it's like you're paying somebody for 2 starting seasons, but only really 1.25 paychecks instead of 1 for 1 type of thing. So I think that's the way to go. And then same thing if Heklinski's your guy, and or if it's Cash Herrera or Jimmy Sullivan or Ryan Fitzgerald really goes in and wows everybody. I mean, it's but it can be a costly situation to do what Iowa has done all these years, which is not do anything well in this area.
Yeah, and it's going to pay, and it's worth investing in, and that's why they brought in a Warren Shiro. It's investing in identifying talent at that position and then developing it. And Scott and I have talked about this. It's a little bit, you can relate it a little bit to the NFL if you can figure that position out. And, not only from a production standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, it makes things easier on the rest because then you can put resources into other areas that are naturally going to pop up. And we need a left tackle and we need whatever, linebacker, whatever the case may be. And then you have those resources. If you're constantly sinking a bunch of money in the quarterback, it's going to take away from those other positions. And speaking of those other positions, we've got a transfer on the offensive line that will be hopefully impactful. And that unit to me was I wouldn't say it was as needed to be addressed as much as quarterback, but it wasn't that far behind quarterback before last year. Made up a lot of ground in the last year, and it seems like that momentum is carrying into 2025, Scott.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is, this is a really interesting area because you look at getting Bryce George, I think it was necessary. They felt like you could see going through camp when they go after somebody like this, they decided we're uncertain of how this position group at a certain area. And I think that's really good. You have, Logan Jones and Jennings Dunker are two of the best at their positions. Now, Jennings Dunker had had a surgery at the end of camp. They expect to be back, at the end of or in August. So they feel good. That's okay. Considering like Brandon Sheriff, had meniscus surgery and then goes out and plays the next week. I mean, you feel good about it. Bo Stevens good, but you're like, okay, 3 out of 5, you feel like, you've got returning starters. You're in great shape. Left tackle was a battle. And I think they handled this again the right way, which is let your guys on the roster compete and see what they've got and let them continue to compete.
Yeah.
But then, you know what? We think we may need somebody there. And you bring in Bryce George, and he's not coming without questions himself. He's a Division II guy, and that is a huge jump up. He's going to have to go up against Max Llewellyn in practice and constantly to fight that speed. And he's a big physical guy. Maybe guard is more his natural position at the next level. But you're looking at left tackle, and if he can be that left tackle for you for 1 year, then you feel really good. And then guard Cade Pieper has kind of been that guy, and but right now, right now we can do a lot of different things here. So I think, but the one area, Rob, that I'm just slightly concerned about here is that they've traditionally done a lot of walk-ons at the offensive line. And this might be an area, they only have one right now, and that's Cale Winter, who is actually competing for the second team center interior line. And if they can find a way to add another walk-on, 1 or 2, if possible, and then I think that that would be really helpful for them. Because when you look at guys from the past, and I'll take one guy in particular, Kyler Schott. He's not going to get recruited in a 105. He was 5'11", 250, really good class 1A, class 2A lineman, all state. Yeah, he just doesn't hit the measurables. But he goes, he works his ass off, and then he becomes a multi-year starter at Iowa. He's tough as hell. He did exactly what they want him to do. Those are the players that Iowa has had success with. And it would be nice to see them be able to pick up maybe one more. Maybe just one more is all they need. But, and they could say, look, this was a guy that we thought we were going to have. And I don't know. That would be helpful to this group. But otherwise, I think that this group is getting much better.
Yeah, and I think with the offensive line, you look at you've got, I think a pretty solid starting five. What's beyond that? Because you always have injuries on the offensive line. Can Mike Mislinski stay healthy and can he contribute? You look, some of the guys that have been in the program for a few years now, Trevor Lauk and Jack Dotzler, and can those guys take a step forward this year? Because again, you get to December and you're going to lose Logan Jones and Jennings Dunker, and Bo Stevens. You're going to lose these guys. What are you developing behind them to keep this going into 26 and beyond? Or are you diving back into the portal again next year to fix or give you more confidence in your line because you don't have confidence in the guys that are developing?
Yeah, and that's kind of a buffer that they've never had before, Rob.
Yeah.
Is that they can go in the portal and get it. And when you lose guys like this, I mean, immediately your eyes kind of bug up and you're like, oh man, that's going to be tough, every year.
Yeah.
But now that there's that option and Iowa's financially competitive to be able to go out and do that. And so they could go out and find the next Bryce George and a couple other players and then feel like they can build from within. But, it's also a very healthy situation, which we haven't seen at offensive line for a few years, where you've got a core group of guys you think are going to start. The three returning starters, Bryce George, you feel like is going to be a starter somewhere. They think left tackle, but it might, if he's not good enough there, then they might kick inside. And then you have some guys who can rotate, or, if Mislinski's healthy, then he's got a chance to play, and Dotzler or Lauk. Well, if it's Lauk, he's still only a redshirt sophomore.
Yeah.
So, that's good. Pieper is a guy that they expect to start. And then you have kind of a really talented redshirt freshman class in Fox, McCaslin, Janowski, and Nolan. Lucas Allgaier, I mean, it was unfortunate that Joey Van Wetzingen left, and went to Central Michigan, but I think Allgaier is really talented. And so then you've got guys that if you can get two of those freshmen, whether it's Allgaier or the redshirt freshman, two of them can appear on the depth chart. Doesn't mean they have to play. Just get into that discussion. Janowski maybe as a backup center at some point, or McCaslin or Fox or Nolan. They can get into that. And then you couple that with next year's the recruits that they have coming in who are going to be really good. Then I think you're in a healthy spot, and maybe you just supplement. Yeah, that's the whole key for Iowa and most of these spots is they want to supplement through the portal. They don't want to be like, a lot of schools that go out and get 30 guys. I mean, they want to get 8 to 10 and 5 if possible. And Cannon Leonard was kind of that Hail Mary candidate, just big, 6'8", and now he's up to 300. If he ever gets to that point of, wow, he's fitting nicely, then they hit a home run. If not, oh well, he swung and missed. You're okay. So, but I like the way things line up there for them this year. It'll be tested, because somebody will get dinged, somebody will have to sit out. You just hope it's for a short period of time, because that's really the separator in good and great years for Iowa.
Yeah, no doubt. And if the offensive line can hold up and especially run block the way it did last year, that opens up a lot of things for Gronowski to do what he does. And then if you look at it, along with quarterback and offensive line, Iowa has made strides at wide receiver, gotten better there. Saw some flashes during the spring game of possibilities there with some young guys, Vander Zee, Howard, Jarrett Bowie, down the list. There are possibilities there. There is potential there, and that's not. We haven't been able to say that for a while.
Yeah.
Tight end looks good. Running back, you lose. One of the best that's ever done it, but you have depth and talent at that position. Dare I say, I feel somewhat confident about the offense. Still a wait and see, but overall, this group, Scott, I think there's a chance here. of taking another step forward in 2025.
For sure. And it's I know we're all kind of in, we've been in cynical mode for so long that we're now in skeptical mode, and it's actually time to kind of go, you know what, they may not be that bad. It's kind of like we're going to date ourselves because I am anyway, because we're old, but the original Major League, when they started winning games, and it's like, and I think they're they have subtitles. It's like, these guys aren't bad, and that's kind of where we are now with the like let's take running back. I mean, you look at it kind of the same way with Jack Campbell a few years ago. You're not going
Yeah,
to replace Jack Campbell. His athletic ability and it was just otherworldly. However, Jay Higgins was pretty freaking good too. And he's not Jack Campbell, but production wise, he was close. I mean, he
yeah,
did everything you asked him to do, and you didn't see a drop off from that position. He just wasn't athletically what Jack Campbell was. That's okay. And I think you look at the same thing with the running backs they've had, and the lack of attrition there has been really heartening for Iowa. I mean, Caleb Johnson, again, tremendous running back. He's the third round pick of the Steelers. I wouldn't be surprised if he runs for 1,000 yards for the Steelers this year. I think he can be a real good player there. But Kamari Moulton also looks the part. He looks like a fifth or sixth rounder potentially. That's really good. Terrell Washington, difference maker. I think he can bring elements to this game that they never had or never used, not since maybe Akron even, which is he's elusive. He can work in space at a really good level. And you might be able to use him in the passing game. I mean, how this program has never developed a screen game with its running backs is just floors me. I was blessed and cursed, I guess, in some respects, to watch the Chiefs with Priest Holmes all those years. When you have guys who can move, Willie Roaf and Will Shields in space, they're Hall of Famers. Brian Waters, 6-time Pro Bowler. And Iowa's a run and hit offensive line, and yet they're not doing this. So I think, but with Terrell Washington and Kamari Moulton, they can implement that very quickly. And Jazz Patterson is really compact, gets north and south. He's a physical running back. I like this trio. And then Nathan McNeil showed me something in the spring practice. And Xavier Williams is big and physical. And Brevin Dahl, we haven't, you're waiting to see if he can be healthy because we know what kind of speed is there. So I think this is a really good, healthy running back room. And the funny thing is, these guys, for the most part, were either replacements type recruits, under the radar guys. I mean, and Washington was because of the Purdue situation.
yeah.
They got him late. And Moulton, if I recall, was because of what Kendrick Raphael backed out, which I saw he was in the portal again, and
Yeah, he went to NC State over Iowa, and then where did he show up? You're right. He popped up somewhere recently. He found a new home, but yeah.
and Jazz was another one that was he was a little more celebrated, I think, but still, I like this room. I mean, you may not have an All-American, but you might have somebody who's still going to get 1,000 yards for you, or a couple of guys who you might have 3 guys over 500, and that's pretty good too.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm hoping. I feel like if this Iowa offensive staff can find a way to utilize Terrell Washington and Caden Weechin and their talents with the ball in their hands in the open field, I think if I start seeing that, I'm like, okay, now we're going somewhere because the other pieces are there. You start getting creative with some of your playmakers. Yeah, I like it.
But what heartens me that may happen, Rob, not only with Tim Lester, but Ruggiero.
Yeah.
And with Billy Van de Kemp, who was with the Jets up until last year. He kind of worked with different positions, quarterbacks most recently, that they are, and pulling Lester from the road. It's designed to do different things, and keeping Caden Weegan because he probably could have made more money going somewhere else. But now that he's going to be involved on the offense, and and misdirection and things like this. I think they're going to be doing stuff. I mean, this isn't the same cross your fingers and hope for the best that maybe they do something different today, on offense. It's like, wow, I think this has a chance to be something pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. And as we said, it's going to need to take a step forward, the offense that is this season, because I think more questions on defense than we're used to. And it happens. I mean, you're going to have attrition. And when Iowa decided to invest in bringing guys back last year on defense, some of the guys that maybe would have stepped in and we would know more about now, linebackers, defensive backs, those are guys we have questions about now. Can they figure out cornerback? Can they figure out safety? Can they figure out depth at defensive tackle? Can they figure out somebody to replace Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson and Kyler Fisher, guys that have been, ultra reliable at that level for the last few years? And I think that it's kind of one of those things, Scott, where we have faith in the defensive coaches at Iowa in developing and identifying, but you still have to see it. And those guys are going to have to go out there. And we've seen it, some different cracks in the armor through the years at times. So don't get overconfident about the defense, but it's one of those things where we're going to have to see if some of these guys that have been around for a while can now take that step forward and move into a bigger role.
You're right. We look at last year, and I think the secondary underperformed. And we haven't seen a secondary not play up to our expectations in a long, long time. And that's with having guys that we expected to be really good players. And some of them individually had good games, but collectively they weren't real solid, or they were solid. And I don't mean that. I mean, they just weren't spectacular like we expected them to be. And so there are legitimate concerns, but I also think there's reasons for optimism. So I think you just take it and evaluate what you see and say, this unit and this coach has done it a million times before. We expect them to make strides, but it's not going to be just magic and it automatically happens either. And so when you look at the secondary, they're going to play, five guys, for the most part, and if they all stay healthy. And I'm bullish on Cohen Entringer and Zach Lutmer.
Agreed.
I think they could be really good, no matter who lines up at cash and who lines up at strong. And I don't know if I've said this before, but I think there's an impression that we have, that fans have, strong safety is supposed to be Bob Sanders, like some big time hitter. It's not because they're strong physically. It's the strong side of the field. It's the wide side of the field. And somebody who can cover a lot of space. That's really what strong side means, weak in the boundary. And so I think these guys have that speed and that ability to cover in space. And I think that's something that I really like about him. Xavier Wampa is probably going to be better, even though free, people seem to think that, then that's the speed guy who can cover deep. It's more that he's in the boundary and can cover be more physical. And I think that's his forte. Now, when you're in 3 deep coverage, that's different than you're playing the middle of the field. But I think that they've got some potential ability to be better at safety this year than they were last year. I do think that. I like TJ Hall a lot, watching your videos and then seeing it live. You could see that he has made those strides that you expect an Iowa corner to make in the end of their career. The fifth one is the question mark. And I think Deshaun Lee is capable, but Shahid Barros, I guess I'll find a little better pronunciation in the future.
He's not on the roster yet with the little ear.
Yeah,
I was looking for him just now to see if I could put it up so we could hear it, but he's not on there.
Yeah, I had to do that way back when with Janai Broom. I'm like, I don't want to say it wrong when I'm on interviews, but I think Barros and Lee will probably be the competitive ones for the other corner, and then maybe you see a Godfrey or a Watson float in there. Maybe Moda. He played pretty well in the spring. He got better. So, and then at safety, Kale Kolarek, Ferentz was really complimentary of him. So they've got some depth and they've got some pieces. It's just they got to take that step forward. And can they do it? Yeah, but you got to see it too.
Yeah, no doubt. And, even I think we know even less about the linebackers
Yeah.
at this point, Scott. So, what are we looking at there? How much did they figure out in the spring, and how much still needs to be figured out here through camp?
This positionally to me, Rob, is the most interesting battle of the team.
Yeah,
because you've got three guys that have waited their turn way too long. They're in a class that got screwed by this whole system because they didn't really get a senior year of football. They didn't get to go on the camp circuit. And then when they went to try to enter the colleges, then everybody was bringing everybody back. And then towards the end, then players were taking extra years, so that was taking their eligibility away, their opportunities. Take Jaden Harrell, for instance.
Yeah.
He would have been a two-year starter. Well, now he's got 1 year. Jackson Rexroth didn't get a scholarship. He had opportunities, but then all these other teams were like, well, yeah, but we're bringing back 40 guys and all that stuff. So he has to walk on. So now is their chance. And I think Jaden Harrell is the safe guy at middle linebacker. They feel like, okay, he can, all the trains will run on time. He's big, he's physical. We like what he does. So I would expect him to get, it would take a lot to dislodge him, I think, there. Carson Shire is the one that they've been talking about for years and raved about being a great athlete, but he just hasn't stayed healthy. He has to stay healthy. This is his chance. And Jackson has played a ton on special teams. He's been a really good player there, and he's a much better athlete than people think. So he got put on scholarship. So now they're at 85. I think that's a good sign. And then beyond that, in the upper tier, veteran tier, you've got Jaden Montgomery, who's been overlooked. Maybe because of his height, maybe because his dad's Jerry. That's the reason why he got a scholarship. No, he's a pretty good player. And Landon
He's
Van
had
Keck,
some injuries too. He
yeah,
had some injuries earlier on, but I think he's starting to settle in.
yeah. And then Landon Van Kekerix is also a guy who's kind of been an ascending player too. So you've kind of got that group up there competing. And then you have the uber talented redshirt freshmen and freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
And how much do they push the upperclassmen? Can they break into the second team? Can they get some reps on the field? Do they actually outperform them in spring or in summer camp? Can they get themselves on the field? That's why I think it's so fascinating, because the safe bet is to see Harrell, Shire, and Rexroth, but does a Wyatt-Koff, does a Buffington, does Preston Reese, who's squatted 630. He and Rexroth both broke positional records in the squad this offseason. Can they push up? Carson Cooney and Burke Goucher, you kind of wonder, are they more on the, they're going to be kick ass on the scout team, but got a chance in the future. They're 4-star guys. So I'm fascinated by how this, and Nolan DeLong isn't exactly your traditional walk-on linebacker. They've got a lot of linebackers. Even they've got 3 walk-on linebackers, which I think is probably too many when you only have 1 walk-on. It's the same number combined as offensive and defensive line. So
Is Burt Goucher's here already, right? Did he enroll
yeah,
early?
he and Cooney both.
All right, so yeah, you've got. I mean, that, like you said, that the true freshman and redshirt freshman classes, they've invested a lot in recruiting wise.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's, so how much can they push the starters to at least get on the depth chart? Buffington, Weiskopf, I think those two in particular, maybe Reese as well. How much can they get in to be on the depth chart? Can they get past Van Kekerix and Montgomery?
Yeah.
Or is it still just kind of, well, you know what? They're still ahead of you, and we're going to play the best players. Because I think at this point, you've got to play the best players. The one question I'm going to have for Seth Wallace is, if it's even, do you push up somebody? If if you think, let's say Weiskopf and Shire are, both neck and neck, do you say, you know what, we're going to take some lumps early because our schedule now, first game, Albany, we want to see, you can make mistakes and you're still going to be okay. Third game against UMass, you can make mistakes, you're still going to be okay. Iowa State's different. But if you get him in there, get him acclimated, is his trajectory like this, that, hey, by mid-season, he could be a really good player? Or is it, I can't risk that? I don't know. That's going to be, they see it every day and they're good coaches. So,
Yep, they're going to have to continue to evaluate, because with the different stages of development for these guys, you would think somebody like Weiskopf or Buffington has a chance to make a bigger jump improvement wise than a Jaden Harrell or a Carson Scher, because they've already hopefully ascended to this point. So it's going to be a constant evaluation, as it is going to be on the defensive front, Scott. And you've expressed some, let's say, concern. I don't know if you're concerned, but just wondering if there is enough depth at the tackle position, and how do they make up for the loss of Y.A. Black, who's probably going to get in a rotation in Pittsburgh this year. So it seems like Aaron Graves is the given. I think Max Llewellyn on the edge and Ethan Herkett are good first team ends. What's after them? And then what's next? What's beyond? Is Jonah Pace that guy? Or is it one of the younger guys at defensive tackle that come up and help Graves?
Yeah, and I mean, they've got three guys. I think right now they on the two deep that kind of fit. Can they be good? That's another question. And Jonah Pace is probably your starter. I would expect. Jeremiah Pittman's been with the program for a long, long time. You want him to be a guy that takes a lot of reps. And then Bryce Hawthorne, who I think is maybe a little more athletic and ascending. They got him from South Dakota State. I would expect him to kind of maybe back up Graves. I mean, you're going to get a lot of reps out of those four, and then maybe beyond too, if you need to. And then, you always have to be prepared for injuries.
Yeah.
You know that's going to happen somewhere. So out of that, if you can get really good reps out of all four of those guys, you'll feel good. Beyond that, I thought I saw some good stuff out of like Devin Kennedy in the spring. I think, they do have two junior walk-ons that have played a little bit, and Will Hubert and Luke Gaffney. I think they have potential to kind of plug in and take some snaps, take some reps. So I think a tackle where you'd like to have somebody else who's maybe like YA, like 325 pounds that just, takes up two blocks. It's not going to quite happen that way. But if Jonah Pace, if your comp is, say, Jack Heflin, you're okay. And if Bryce,
so it's not Y.A. Black or Carl Davis. It's more of a smaller leverage
Jaleel,
that type of defensive tackle. But I think Graves and Llewellyn have a chance to be all conference. Those two guys.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Ethan Herkett, you know what you're going to get.
Yep.
I wouldn't be. I think what can separate though, I think they can be, and if there's a good part of this for Iowa, is that teams don't run power ball that often anymore the way they did. I mean, look at Wisconsin; they're not that way. Minnesota's about one of the few that do, and I think. But what could separate this unit and make major changes is what can they bring off the edge in different situations? Because I think Llewellyn, as you said, I think might be the best pure pass rusher they've had since Van Ness, and we only got to see him for a little bit. He just looks the part. He's long, he's athletic, he does everything. It's like, okay, you got a guy. And Ethan Herkett is salt of the earth Iowa guy.
He's Joe Evans in a lot of ways.
Parker Hesse to me.
Yep.
Yeah. Brian Allen was out all spring, but I think you've seen an ascending player there. Kenny Merriweather looks to me like he's making strides. And that's what you want. Joseph Anderson has unbelievable athletic ability. And if he's the type of guy you figure, you know what, let's on 3rd and 8, and then we know that they're passing. Let's put him in as a stand-up edge rusher because he's so quick off the edge and he's long and he's athletic. Maybe we just get a couple snaps a game from him, but that's until he's big enough and full service enough to take that step. And then finally, can't sleep on Yosei Epineza. His brother was pretty good in year 1, and Yosei's looks exactly like him.
And he's throwing the shot and disc like a madman, like AJ did as well.
Exactly. So if you could bring him in and he's taking 15 snaps a game as a true freshman, you'll take it. Outside of having that big 320-pound ass kicker, coming off the edge, coming up, in the 0 or 1 tech, I feel like this could be a B unit right now with potential to grow. So, overall, Rob, what's kind of your thoughts on the team right now, where it sits and how it kind of sets up?
I've been kind of trained into the complementary football lens and looking at it that way. And I do think the offense can take a step forward. I think the defense, if it can do roughly what it did last year, I think that's okay. I think Iowa's going to be better at punter and kicker because I think those two guys are going to be better than they were last year. You got Caden Weechem back. I think the special teams and the offense may be able to help the defense if the defense has to go through some growing pains early.
You're right, because you look at like 2 years ago, our whole thought was, what if Iowa just had an average offense? How good because of the defense? Well, this defense isn't going to be that good, but it can be good. And if it's good and the offense goes from being putrid, worst in the Big Ten in 40 years, to being better than average, decent, capable, then you're if it can take care of the ball, if it can have long drives, if it can score points, then you change the game radically for your team. I mean, last year, you look at, there were four out of the 5 losses were certainly winnable.
Yeah.
And I would really say that like the losses to losing teams, Michigan State and UCLA, were complementary in the way they lost, which is their defense didn't stop the run very well, but the offense had opportunities. Like the Michigan State game, they forced 5 field goals in the first half because the offense did nothing. And Cade could not have played worse, except that he did in the final 3 quarters against Iowa State when he was 5 of 18. And they're running the ball at will, and he couldn't do anything and through the air. 27 yards passing over the final 3 quarters, missing open receivers. If you have a guy who's just hitting open receivers, and moving the ball, and then now you have receivers who can do something with it. I mean, think back 2-3 years ago when Arlen Bruce was the only scholarship player available in weeks 1 and 2. You just, and in special teams, they could be the best in the country at that, and they brought in a long snapper, a walk-on from BC, and Bryant Worrell, and so, that's competition. Is he going to start? Well, we don't know, but he's there, and Ike Speltz is there, and whoever emerges, great, so I feel pretty good about this team where it sits. I think they did a really nice job handling the 85. They may not, their offensive line and quarterback is where they heavily invested on offense. And I think the other pieces are good. Now, I think the receiving, this is the best that they've been since probably 2020 when they had Smith-Marset and Smith and Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy. Jesus, did they let a good team get away there? God, how can you do that? And tight end. Back then he also had Laporta.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It was hard to be that bad. It took a lot of effort to be that bad.
God.
But with this team, Scott, I look at it, and the good teams have you can see various avenues to victory that they can rely on different parts of the team on different weeks. This team feels like it maybe one week it wins offensively. Maybe one week it's the offense is good enough that the defense, uh, the opposing offense is now having to throw the ball. And if the
Mhm.
Iowa's offense can make the opposing offense become more one dimensional, that helps the defense. Again, we're talking complementary football
Yeah.
here, folks. And I think this Iowa team at least has the potential to be able to win the game in all three phases. I'm not sure you could have said that recently in this decade.
Last time they could do that, Rob, maybe was 18 or 19.
Yeah, I was going
You
to
know,
say 19.
yeah, when
And even then, it really wasn't until more the end of the year.
yeah, and it was kind of up and down too. There were
Yeah,
moments where,
inconsistent. Yeah.
I mean, Stanley at times was very inconsistent. He was able, when they had like it was weird because at 18 they had great tight end play with Hawkinson and Fant. And 19 when they were gone, then they had pretty good wide receiver play. And then Brandon Smith had that high ankle sprain, and it wasn't until that bowl game against USC that they really put it all together. And
And then Laporta had developed a little bit by then too.
yeah. So it was just like this unevenness. And I think right now, I don't know that I see Smith Marset but I think Addison Ostrengas can be a really good tight end. I think Ortworth has the potential to be there too.
Mhm.
And the receivers, there's like 8 of them that you feel like, you know what, these guys, they're not that bad, like Major League, So, but the one point you bring up, and this is imperative to this year, is that there is going to be a couple of games where the offense is going to have to keep them in
Yeah.
the game. When you look at Indiana, Indiana is freaking stacked. They're good. They brought in a quarterback because they lost Curtis Rourke. They brought in Fernando Mendoza, who might be better. They have an elite schemer. Kurt Signetti, the way they space the field, and Elijah Surratt at wide receiver, and then they've got Mekhi Hughes at running back, or oh, not him. They got a different guy, but they got some really good players. That's going to be a game where you're not like, hey, if we hold them to 20 points, we're going to win. This is a
Yeah.
game like if you hold them to 20 points, you got a chance. You should win, but you're not going to hold them to 20 points. They're just that good. Oregon, same deal. I mean, athlete for athlete, they're as good as any team in the country. Penn State could be the number 1 team in the country, but you're playing them all at home. But and then I would say like a team like at USC, not what you think of it with USC, but they've got offense, and they're going to put up points against you. They're going to chase you around, and if you can't get to the quarterback, you might have some issues. So those are games where you're looking at offense. You're just going to have to continue to score. You're going to have to push the ball. You can't go into 4-minute mode and at the beginning of the fourth quarter.
And get some first downs, right? Even if you're not scoring touchdowns, maybe you get a field goal or just possess the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the offenses that you've just talked about, Penn State, Oregon, USC, keep them off the field as much as possible by having sustained drives on offense.
Exactly. Like when I look at the 2 games where not only sustaining drives, but you're going to have to score these drives, it's Indiana and Oregon.
Yeah.
Because they can score against any team.
Quickly.
Yeah, and they're very, very good at it. When you look at Penn State, that's probably where you're going to have to sustain drives and really push the ball because they've got great running backs because they can hold the ball too. They not only can they score, but they've got the opportunity to push it for 6-7 minutes and score. And so you're going to have to even that out by going ball control, and then there are other teams like USC, which has the ability to score quick. So you're going to have to kind of suffocate them as well. So, and I think this team is capable of adapting. It just, you're going to have to get a good year out of Mark Gronowski, and you're going to have to get a healthy year out of your offensive line, and your defense is going to have to come around. And if that all happens with this schedule, as good as it is, because it's the second most difficult schedule based on last year's record in the Big Ten. If that happens, then this team can be very competitive for the playoffs. it could be in that 10-win range. And if you were 10-2 with this schedule, you should be in that final conversation at large or championship. If not, and the scary part for me, Rob, is what we've seen. Like it reminds me of what could have happened in 2010 and probably a little bit of 2018 and 19, which was you drop off at linebacker, injuries, you lose a couple of close games, and it just kills you. And so, I think this team could go either way, and I'm not prepared to predict one way or the other, but I do think that's why it's imperative that they really turn up the pressure on linebacker right now.
And I agree with you. And the measuring stick now, the component that keeps people engaged in the new landscape of college football is, do you still have a chance to make it to the college football playoff? Last year, Iowa kind of got knocked out of that conversation early. And then you're just kind of going, you're not just playing out the string, but the top prize is out of the picture. And Iowa's schedule this year sets up similarly. It's hard, you got that early game at Iowa State. You got the halfway across the country to Rutgers, should beat Rutgers home or away, but it's a road game, like you said, Indiana, then at Wisconsin, then Penn State. You got to navigate that to keep yourself in the race and keep people engaged, that you still have a shot at the playoff.
I can make a strong case that every single Power 5 opponent that Iowa plays is capable of beating them if they don't play well. Iowa State, they were 11-3 last year. They were, this is an 11-win team that almost went to the playoffs. And I know people poo-poo, well, it's just Iowa State. We need to get them off the schedule. We don't gain anything. No, that era is over, man. You put it to rest. This isn't Dan McCarney and all that happy horse crap. You put that to rest. At Rutgers, you're going to look at it and go, it's just Rutgers. This is a different Rutgers team with Greg Schiano. They are physical. They will hit you in the mouth. This is a traditional Ferentz ball game. Now, you think, Ethan Kaliak-Manis, who used to be the quarterback in Minnesota, being the starter, you got a chance to be successful, and you should. But it's a tank game where you're on the road, probably a short week because I think it's going to be a Friday game, and you're going to be like, okay, well, how do you manage it? Indiana, if you can win by 1 point, take it. Just don't even mess with it. And then we're not even getting the rivalry games in the Big Ten. At Wisconsin, they're a team that's in heavy transition, but and they've got a hell of a schedule in that month. But you're there. That's not easy. Penn State at home, not easy. Minnesota, rivalry game. They beat you the last time here. I think we all remember why. Then you go to the West Coast. You got a week off. You play Oregon, best talent that you're going to face all year. At USC, going to the West Coast is not easy. And going to USC won't be easy. Michigan State at home, they beat you last year. They've still got Aiden Childs, who I think is a really good quarterback, and Nick Marsh and some other players. Going to Nebraska, yes, you've had a lot of success against Nebraska, but have you thought that that it wasn't going to go into overtime each of the last 2 years? I mean, every single game is close. So, and they have improved their roster. Whether that measures up to success, I don't know. But I think so. You look at all that. And what you have to be good. There's no off weeks. I mean, Albany and UMass aside, and you can figure some things out there. But you're looking at this going, there's a chance. You've got to be on your game, and you're going to mess up. I was going to lose the game. Just mark that down. They're not going undefeated this year, but they've got a chance if they play well, and they shore up the question marks to be a very competitive team, top 15.
Agreed. And you put yourself in the top 15, you got a shot at the playoff, and that's where you want to be this day and age. And as we said at the top of the show with Iowa baseball having an opportunity against Oregon and Oregon State, Iowa has a difficult schedule, but those also should be viewed as opportunities to build your resume to put you in that playoff when the time comes. So we'll see how it shakes out. We'll have more to talk about with this moving forward, but the roster If you go on HawkeyeSports.com now, looks very much what it will look like come August. And obviously, there's opportunities and chances that could change or switch up a little bit. But that's your core right there. And what we talked about here in this podcast is kind of our feelings on what it looks like right now. But as usually is the case, we'll have different. We'll receive different information and different data between now and August to make us change our mind. It's the way it goes in sports, right? So, yeah. Scott, what you got going on the Athletic? I know a lot of Iowa fans want to read about your path to Iowa State being competitive.
If you want to click on it and then click off of it, I would appreciate it just to get the numbers higher. No, I've got one story that's kind of in the bank, or it's actually two right now. One's Iowa football, one's Illinois football. So, because the thing is with, like we were saying with football in Iowa, even if you go 10-2, you look at the league, they're not playing Illinois, which is in the same ballpark as Iowa. You're not playing Ohio State and Michigan. We know what they're all about. I think Washington is going to be a bounce back team. They've got a really, really good young quarterback in Damon Williams. I think he's going to be exceptional. So you throw all those things out there, and but anyway, Iowa State, I wrote about them the other day. I won't get into it on this podcast. And then Illinois and Iowa's offense coming up. So, and I'm off next week. So
nice. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
We'll see how, if that impacts our podcast, we'll let you guys know. But we appreciate you tuning in for this one. We appreciate our sponsors for helping us bring you these podcasts, and hope you guys have a great rest of your week and weekend. Enjoy May. Enjoy the weather's been pretty nice. And before you know it, all the stuff we've talked about on this podcast about football will be here. So enjoy the spring and summer. Don't wish it away. But have an eye looking forward to the football season, as we know you do. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Be well, and yeah, we'll talk to you.